Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Suli, and this channel is based on my personal experiences, which I want to share with you if you're on a similar journey of spiritual awakening. Now, I am not a therapist. I am not a psychologist. I'm just sharing in the hope that it might help you. But if my content doesn't help you, and if you're not ready to heal, and there's nothing wrong with that because we all have our own timing, but if you're not ready to heal, then I suggest very strongly that you consult a licensed therapist. Okay, now let's get on with it. If you can check these 3 boxes, then you're nailing it. You are rocking it, But even if you don't, even if you have just a tiny bit of any of these 3, you're still ahead. You're ahead of being stuck. There's this Chinese proverb that says, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one small step, or something like that anyway. So don't feel bad if you don't check all 3, or if you're not doing it perfectly well. None of us are perfect. The important thing is that you've started. And this is just a guideline, this is just a checklist, because once in a while we need to remind ourselves how far we've come. Okay, let's get on with it. Number 1, you see triggers as opportunities for growth, for personal spiritual growth. When someone says something that hits a nerve, you no longer lash out at them, wanting to correct them, wanting to prove that they're wrong, because whether they're right or wrong is irrelevant. You don't care about that anymore. What you care about now is how it triggered you and why it triggered you. You are more interested in finding out which areas of yourself that is susceptible, that's vulnerable to triggers. And that's why you no longer lash out and blame the other person for saying something that hit a nerve in you. Instead, you see value in triggers because they help you grow. And because you are now strong and brave enough to look inward. Why do I say strong and brave enough? Well, it's because you have the strength and the courage to now be a master and not a slave to your ego. You see, your ego doesn't want you to awaken. Your ego has a life of its own and it wants to control you. Now, if you've watched one of my previous videos, which I'll include a link here, I don't believe in killing the ego. You see, the ego is very useful, but there comes a time when it's just too much that it becomes counterproductive and it's harmful to us because it stunts our spiritual growth. So do watch that video, because in that video I talk about how we can be friends with our ego and how our ego can be partners with our higher spiritual self. And that is when we become whole. That's what wholesome means, because we're not ruled by our ego, neither are we too far into the spirituality realm, because we're still living in the 3D world. We still need to do 3D world material things. So this is why a partnership between our higher self and our ego is the dream team. So once you see triggers as a good thing, once you see value in it, then self-reflection is no longer annoying to you. It's not intimidating to look inward. It doesn't cause a meltdown when someone says something that hits a nerve, because you know that it's not about the other person. It doesn't matter whether they're right or wrong. You have stopped ruminating over what the other person said. And ruminating, I find, for me anyway, it's my personal experience, that ruminating wasted so much of my time trying to prove the other person wrong because my ego wanted to be right. It didn't do me any favors. In fact, it set me back. It delayed my own healing because I was too focused on the external world. I was too focused on trying to prove someone wrong, that I was right. What's the point? First, there's no point. Secondly, it really is harmful for us because it stops us from looking inward. But once we look inwards, then we take responsibility for how we feel. We take responsibility for how we react to the external world. And we stop blaming them because we see value in the triggers. Because we've got to a stage where we have enough self-respect and self-love to do this for ourselves. I used to blame other people. I used to blame everyone, blame the whole world. I used to blame God. Hell, I even used to blame the weather, even the birds that were chirpy when I was sad. How dare they sing when I'm not in the mood to hear them sing? And one day I realized that changed nothing. The weather's it's still gonna rain, or it's still gonna be extremely hot. The birds are still gonna sing regardless of how I feel. And I learned something from the birds, because they didn't care how I felt about their chirping, about their song, whether I liked their song or not. They still continued to chirp joyfully. They weren't triggered by me. Now, granted, some people have it worse than others. I'm not saying that we should compare. Neither am I saying that these people who harmed you are not scumbags. Yes, they're scumbags, but how long do we want to call them scumbags for? I mean, look at successful people, well-adjusted people who had terrible childhoods. Look at Tony Robbins, Jim Carrey. Look at Ashley Judd, Charlize Theron. They all had really terrible childhoods, and yet they've become well-adjusted people. They didn't get to where they are by chanting, "We're the victims and we love it." Maybe they did for a while, and there's nothing wrong with feeling sorry for yourself. I've said this time and again, I've said it before many times. There is nothing wrong with feeling sorry for ourselves, but there must come a time when it has to stop, because that is what's keeping us stuck. When we go through the stages, that's why they're called stages. We have to move on. So that's point number one. You use triggers to your advantage. You're the winner, not the trigger. Number two is emotional regulation. You have learned how to regulate your emotions without being a victim to external circumstances. You take responsibility for how you feel. And you know that as much as you are confident in walking this path, there are days where you're not as strong as you'd like to be. There are days where you're not as strong as you normally are. And those are the days where you give yourself a break. It's like when you're swimming in an ocean. Life is like an ocean. You know exactly when to hold on to a float, and you know when to release it. You know how to regulate your emotions. You don't beat yourself up for days where you feel weaker than normal. I mean, life is like the ocean. It's unpredictable. But now you know how to handle it a lot better than before. You know where to seek help. You go to people and places that lift you. You no longer search for someone to pick a fight with just because you're having a bad day. So life, just like the ocean, sometimes it's calm and sometimes it's rough. And that will never change. But the difference is that you can handle it a lot better than before. And you're aware of your emotions enough to be prepared minutes before the storm arrives. And you don't judge life or other people for throwing curveballs at you, just like you don't judge the ocean. Number three is that you truly understand on a cellular level that everyone has a different perspective, because everyone is unique. Everyone has a different past. They're genetically different from us. Their upbringing is different. Their culture is different. I mean, our paths are truly unique to us. So you truly understand that everyone has a very different perspective from us. Now, this sounds obvious and simple, but it's a huge achievement to truly understand it, so don't underestimate it. Understanding that we all have different perspectives means that we don't expect someone else to change for us, to change their beliefs, their behavior, what they say. We don't expect them to walk on eggshells for us. We don't expect them to make us feel better. And we allow them to express themselves in whatever way they want to express themselves. We're not fazed. We're not fazed because we've stopped taking it personally. And we're strong enough to allow them to be themselves without having to change their reality to suit us. And this is where there is so much freedom to be had when we don't expect them to behave in the way that we want them to. Just think of the birds. Every time someone triggers you, just think of the birds. Will they stop singing because I'm in a bad mood? Will they sing a different song? So there are many things external to us that'll never change, ever. I used to get annoyed with my dogs when they were barking while I was meditating. But then I realized that, hey, the barking makes me focus internally even more, because when there's complete silence, that's when my mind is full of chatter. But when my dogs are barking, I find that I focus more on the internal silence. Like, it gives me a contrast. So anyway, that's just my personal method of meditation, where when there's noise outside, it actually helps me focus deeper within myself. You may have a different method, but it all leads to internal peace, doesn't it? So however you want to meditate, however you want to come to some sort of internal peace, you'll find that the more you focus on this internal peace, the more your life is like a gyroscope in a rough sea. You know those gyroscopes in ships, where it stabilizes the ship no matter how rough the seas are? You'll find that you have this internal gyroscope. So if you've checked all three boxes, you are well on your way to spiritual success. But even if you don't check all three, even if you're doing just a tiny bit, you're still in a very good place, because it means there's movement. It means you are moving forward. This is a journey. You know, nobody does it overnight. Well, not nobody, but it's very rare that people do it overnight. It is a journey of one step at a time. Because you know what? There's nothing worse than being stuck. For as long as you see even a tiny bit of progress, you're in a great place. You know, you're going to get there for sure. You made a choice to move forward. People who remain stuck made a choice to stay stuck. And it's possible to stay stuck for an entire lifetime. But you've made that choice to move forward. So pat yourself on the back for it. And with self-awareness, which you obviously have, but even if you have a small amount of self-awareness, and I'm not trying to be sarcastic, I'm not being condescending, okay? But all I'm saying is that even with a small bit of self-awareness, it's impossible for you to fail.